Welcome.
Welcome. I mean, counterintuitive as it may seem that one might want to discuss architecture with visual aids. We're going to embark on a radio vision experiment.
Yes, after it's only 87 episodes, and we've finally achieved.
Getting on for 6 years or whatever, 5.5 years.
But we've achieved the third dimension. We're going to do 3 episodes about an architect who is quite kind of dear to both of us, Carlo Scarpa.
Oh God, are we doing that thing again where we say how many episodes we're going to do?
We should say this is about buildings and cities. Now,
you can put faces to the names.
Yes.
I'm George Gingell.
I'm Luke Jones.
This is about buildings.
Very nice to finally meet you in the flesh.
Yes. yeah. It's been a long time, isn't it?
And yeah, so
we normally, when we record, actually sitting rather further apart due to both presumably having somewhat Asperger's tendencies.
Yeah.
And for the conveniences of
staring at adjacent walls.
Yes. Sound separation.
Now we're with you.
Yes.
So Carlo Scarpa he was an architect from the Veneto, born in Venice, in fact, and he's a kind of creature of that extremely strange city, that's extremely kind of unique urban condition. We've both been interested in his work for a bit, and we've been to visit it together. I was looking at this photo from one of our cycle trips where we're sheltering from the rain in front of this like weird pastiche knockoff Carlo Scarpa shop in Verona, which sells shoes.
It's good.
It's got a sort of knockoff of his like very characteristic little square weird architrave detail, but done in like cheap pine.
I like the lettering.
Yeah.
I mean, actually,
Why
they
not?
can pull a lot off in Italy.
Yeah.
There's a whole separate negotiation over what is kitsch or ironic, and what is just sort of like
having a good time.
Sort of fits, yeah.
Like his style is instantly recognizable, and in a sense, what's interesting about him, or one of the things that's interesting about him, is the way that he seems to mark a kind of like high watermark of the possibility of like extreme attention to craft, detailing, super precision, sort of relentless inventiveness in every like dimension and every sort of space of the building, to an extent that some people have even found, I think, a little bit odious in the way that it seems to turn away from the sort of social reality of a building towards its existence as a like totally crafted luxury object.
Carlo Scarpa was an artist.
Yeah.
An architect. Not all architecture is like that. Not all good architecture is like that. You've got a sort of spectrum, even in how people are trying to project themselves. Le Corbusier, in fact, was quite prone to the sculptural, but the idea with his works is that they are, efficient, socially, projecting a useful in society, representative of a modern tendency, and at the artistic end, you could say in this period someone like Louis Kahn, who is producing things which are more overtly sculptural. Although I'm not saying there's a separation to be made with people who make things which really are sculptural, as in you get some designers who make things which really are a sculpture, the building, and it's taking over from being what the building is, which I don't think Carlo Scarpa is exactly.
No.
What he's doing is trying to make like hyper buildings,
Yes.
where the buildinginess
it's like fractal.
is super intense.
Yeah.
This door is super doory.
Yes.
This wall is super wally. This window, the light from it is gorgeous. The way you walk, the relationship between the door and the window. And this obviously can make, at one level, the works tremendously appealing.
Yes.
As kind of objects of consumption. They're very sensually pleasing.
Yeah.
Like extremely tasteful, expensive meal.
Mm-hmm.
nothing too much except the sort of except it is
Yes.
way too much, but it's all
It's barely a building sometimes.
yeah.
In a way,
it's
it's like
ludicrously overdone
yeah.
combination of restraint and largesse at the same time.
Yes, often it's the kind of drama of a like amazing sort of urban landscape, but condensed down to the scale of like a skirting board.
All of the famous buildings are super luxury.
Hmm.
Not in the sense of like, shiny, but done to an extremely elaborate scale of design.
Hmm.
In a style which is both very clearly of its era and is, if you hadn't seen him and you had a good sense of the history of architecture, I think you could place him to within his decades correctly, and also where in the world these buildings are
Yeah.
pretty exactly.
Although they're also totally unique.
But
and,
at the same time as being extremely specific.
Yeah. He's someone who students are often encouraged to have a look at or like to refer to and to really study. I think for generally quite good reason, in the sense that his designs they kind of force you to confront them at these like minuscule scales. They kind of dramatize tiny moments. Often when you're starting off trying to learn how to design things, it becomes about arranging like big boxes whose only scalar reference is the like little SketchUp person or whatever. And Scarpa really forces you to sort of think through the possibilities of things which are like this big, nothing smaller than the scale of a hand, like these kind of. He's also like very well known for his drawing. We're going to talk about that more in subsequent episodes, but he has like he's a kind of quintessential designer. All of the like paraphernalia of his process is very beautiful and very like kind of full of poetry.
Is so much object fetishism.
Yeah.
At every level.
Yeah.
A lot of people like for something in life, you've often got like a level of appetite for something, and then you kind of get satiated.
Yes.
Like you just can't keep eating all the time, or sometimes when you're in somewhere like Italy, it's great and then you just have too much of this beauty.
Yeah.
Of these like stunning buildings, and after a while it becomes kind of oppressive. Or like, I don't know this is true, but I imagine like he couldn't do anything in his life without making it kind of ceremonial.
Yes, I think that might well be true.
I imagine this guy's breakfast routine.
Yeah.
It's quite. This is not a sandwich at the desk.
No, I think he was a bon viveur. There are some nice. He enjoyed the pleasure of looking and the pleasure, all the kind of pleasures of the different senses. So there's nice reminiscence of when in the 60s he came to design a exhibition at the Hayward Gallery. They had like an exhibition of frescoes from Florence, and the guy who was working on it with him took him around, and he said, yes, he very much enjoyed the pleasure of looking. This was, you must remember, the time of the miniskirt. And they like describe going to.
It's funny. He's got certainly in later periods, kind of a weaselly face.
Yeah, he is
like
super
definitely
super
a dapper
weasel.
dresser, but not
I'm not sure he was like
not super hot. Maybe
no, I don't think he was at all. And then they also describe, he loved a big fan of roast beef and was impressed by John Soane's museum. That's other little factoids, as he would be. I want to put a pin in that. I think that in the way that he's received, I think that there are for some people, he does represent a kind of unacceptable level of self-indulgence as a designer, like total self-gratification. And I have come across lots of people over the years who are quite performatively against Carlo Scarpa. They tell you that they don't like him and they don't like his architecture as a sort of demonstrative like evidence of their own ethical seriousness, which I think does miss a lot about there's a lot of other stuff that's interesting in it, which we're going to hope to tease out over the discussion. They're not totally wrong though.
When we went to see it, a lot of people say there's the famous Biron Vega Cemetery, which we went to on the trip, and it's quite near Rossi's Modena
Yeah.
cemetery, and so people often go on architecture trips around that bit of Italy and see both of them. And a quick sort of straw poll: most people prefer the Scarpa, and I actually found the Scarpa really difficult to get on with because of that reason. I think I'm coming out of having a sort of quite strongly soft political view of architecture, and it just seems so damn feudal.
Yeah.
You've got all of this incredibly lavish thing setting up these two sort of bourgeois couple as like pharaohs.
Yes.
And all this beauty is just in the hollow remembrance.
Yeah, of this like
it felt like a pharaonic tomb.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that one in episode 3.
Yeah, I mean it's a stunning work. But also, even in it, there are many sort of sculptural things, very symbolic. But there's also like a garden shed for the ground, and the garden shed is in exactly the same intense level of splendor.
Yeah.
And I was like, this guy, he's got one gear.
Yeah.
And when the gun is loaded, when he's got like the money and resources, he just fires like lavish, lush. This is going to be the most tasteful thing you've ever seen. Boom. It's attractive because it's so delightful and wonderful and tasteful, and it's so much a super architecture, and it's also revolting.
Yeah,
especially when you've been around, northern Italy for a week or two by then, and you've seen so many things of such extraordinary levels of beauty.
Yes,
I had that response. This is way too long, Mike. Talk about it. But...
No, it's fine. So, shall we talk about him? Maybe talk about his background a little bit. He was born in 1906 in Venice, but then grew up in Vicenza. So he's almost the same generation as Charles Eames. It's like similar age to like Charlotte Perriand, a little bit younger than Louis Kahn, Lubetkin, those kind of people who are about 5 years older than him. But that's sort of just to place him in the kind of generations. His father was a primary school teacher. And then basically the life story is, grew up in Vicenza, seems to have been a bright boy at school, as you would kind of expect. And then his mother died in 1919, when he was, I guess, like 12 or 13, and they moved back to Venice. And then he entered the Accademia, which is the academy, while he was still in his teens. And the training there would have been a kind of very sort of traditional. This is a picture of it, like little video of Venice, in case people don't know what it looks like. But
you just love utility vehicles. Luke has never got over the boyhood fascination. I mean, to be fair, neither have I. With like fire engines and ready-mix trucks.
Yeah, I think the magic of it never really goes away, no matter how many tourists there are. But it's very much improved by people driving ready-mix concrete vehicles up and down on the canals as they do. Just to finish the life story. So I think he didn't get in the first time, but he got in the second time, and he went to the Accademia, I think, when he was about 15.
Which is also the gallery.
Yes, it is now the gallery, but rather like the Royal Academy in London, it had, and I don't know if it still has, a sort of educational program with a training, and the training there was based on drawing and was very much of the traditional kind. So it was you would be doing your kind of like different sorts of descriptive geometry, drawing different sorts of like improving things like the proverbial bust of Socrates, these kinds of things in different ways. And then he received his diploma in the mid-20s, by which time he was already working for an architect whose granddaughter he later married, which is canny.
Practical.
Yes. And I mean, the impression I get of him in that time is like, I think he was extremely skilled draftsman. was kind of handy.
I'm not sure you should have that while having that drawing on.
Yeah, this one's not great, is it? This is this extremely weird student scheme we're looking at, which is this. It's kind of like Gothic massing with Baroque details. It's looks quite.
Yeah, I'm also
science-fictional.
not sure the Repro has done it that much favors, but
Yeah. And then I think as like a young designer, he was very much. We've got to remember. So at this time, it's there's fascism in Italy. We talked a bit on some previous episodes about what that meant for architecture, and he was very much of the party aligned with rationalism, which is the sort of modernist spirit in Italian architecture. And he was designing, he designed a bunch of buildings, none of which got built, I think, which were these sorts of international style boxy things. This one, I've got a reproduction out of a book which has this sort of sweet little note on the side saying I've got to make my designs less derivative of Robert Mallet Stevens, who was a famous international style designer of the period.
But it's a very good basis on which I think architecture school could teach more pastiche now.
Yeah, it wouldn't be so bad.
It's a good technique to if you start, because you can try and start with being completely innovative, but I think if you start by trying to pastiche, you're moving away from it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you start by being original, you're continually struggling to avoid pastiche.
Yeah. Yes. What else happened? I think there are like, I don't want to spend too long on this, but I think there are three sort of important things which happened in the 30s. So he got married and had a kid or two in the early 30s. Almost like his only known public political act, as far as I'm aware, was he was involved in like a group of young rationalists who wrote an open letter defending rationalism, which is reproduced in the biography I've been reading. And he was otherwise like someone who doesn't have very strong public politics, and indeed I think didn't really enjoy talking about architecture very much in any respect.
I mean, like a little note on that, my impression from the way he designs is that he was really interested in the thing he was interested in. This sort of fulfillment of a certain kind of desire, pleasure in a certain sort of experience, almost to the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah. Yes. I think what he liked talking about was poetry. I think that's there.
Oh my god.
I think that was the
like
vibe.
People talking about poetry is bad.
He was practicing on his own, but I don't think he had very much work. But he got his first commission that people would know about, which was the refurbishment of a palazzo called Ca' Foscari, which is on the Grand Canal and which was being turned into an economics university.
It's absolutely one of
Venice.
the grandest
Yeah.
of what is already a pretty grand genre, the sort of Venice palace.
Yes, and it's kind of a bit. I haven't been able to disentangle this. They did some work on it in the 30s, and he also did a lot more work in the 50s, when he introduced these like Frank Lloyd Wright style wooden elements and things like this. But anyway, something happened, and they did start.
I think he did put the glazing in, and a podium, which you can't see in those pictures.
Yeah, and then his main design activity, I think, at this time was working for the Venini glass company, which is one of the glass manufacturers in Murano. And
let's put a better picture than that of them.
Well, yeah. So this one
Even
is
this
one we're looking at are these little hexagonal glasses, which I've got a picture of because they're still in production. So they're you see them in shops in Venice. They're these little hexagonal tumblers with a coloured rim. But there's also he also did a lot of these very kind of, I don't know, how would you describe these? They're very much based on drawing. They're these sort of like big, but also on exploring unusual methods of glass manufacture. So like beating the glass against things or creating these sort of funny little repetitive dots that go through them.
I would say they're extremely developed examples of like studio glasswork. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not novel techniques, but he's really exploring the full gamut of, this thing where you're drawing different glasses through each other, striking hot glasses against each other to make a thin layer where it's scraping across the thing, fusing blocks, grinding,
Yeah.
carving,
Yeah.
but also extremely heavily worked.
Yeah.
They must have been phenomenally expensive.
Yeah, I expect so. And I think this is very much the way in which he's going to work, which is extremely connected to having very good craftsmen who can do particular, often slightly unusual skills,
Yeah.
in which you can then get them to do what you want with them, which we'll be seeing a certain amount of in other buildings as well. And then the other thing, sorry, I don't know how many of these I mentioned, but that he also started teaching at the new architecture university, which he hadn't been to, which he would teach at for about 50 years, I think. The main things which I think he was teaching there were like decoration course, and descriptive.
I don't think we have that one anymore, do we?
I think they're all things which we don't have. So like decoration, descriptive geometry, which is like, how does the shadow of a pyramid falling across a sphere look like? Which is
like the shape, like the projected shape of it.
Yes.
Like, sure, yeah.
If you went to university in Romania, you would still learn how to do this, I'm told, but not in the UK. Composition, yeah,
We
like
definitely don't have that anymore.
yeah. Also pity, but I mean the university. I'm not sure we're going to talk about it that much, but certainly in like the post-war, you have the big architecture university in Venice feels like one of the big intellectual centres.
Was in Forment
one of the big intellectual centres of like Italian like architecture, I guess, and then also lots of radicalism, which he was very much not a part of. There's a funny story about so he taught Mario Botta. And he's like at one point he's reminiscing he's reminiscing about Botta in his in an interview, and he says about Botta, like, yeah, the good thing about Mario was when everyone else was on strike, he would still come in. So we spent a lot.
Very reliable.
We spent a lot of time together.
Very reliable.
And I think like he was like it was very tiring. Like all the students just wanted to talk about criticism all of the time instead of drawing. Not really what he wanted to do, but yeah, there's a whole like lineage of people who I guess are sort of famous if you know a little bit about.
If you do want to learn how
architecture of that
to
period.
become an architect,
Yeah,
I hate to say it, your role in society will not be as political as you might want.
no, unfortunately.
It will be actually learning how to do the work would be useful, although that's not necessarily all that much of what you'll be learning anyway. So.
Yeah. But I mean, learning how to do the work might tell you that actually you don't want to do the job. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true.
A breakthrough that occurs to a lot of people at one time or another. But yeah, so there were all these people who, if you read a little bit of, if you are sort of into this period, people like Manfredo Tafuri, Giancarlo Di Carlo, Bruno Zevi, Paolo Portoghesi, they're like
we should do some of those guys.
Yeah.
Some big hitters.
Yeah, one of the things which is when I was doing the research, one of the things which I found really a bit weird is how many of them were simultaneously a professor, often in architectural history, and also like a member of parliament or a senator. Like like Scarpa's.
It's funny because if an architecture history professor
it's another thing we don't do.
An MP in the UK, you would assume he would be on like the radical right.
Yes. Yeah.
But I don't get that impression from.
No, I think Xavi was a radical liberal. The others are all different shades of the left. Obviously, the Second World War happened. That was a thing. And then in the post-war, there was a certain amount of privation, and he carried on working for the glass company up until the late 40s. And then from the early 50s, he seems to have quite a lot of commissions going on. In 1950, he did the book pavilion for the Venice Biennale, which was there for a number of years and then eventually burnt down, which is this sort of strangely...
I mean, the first thing I would say about that is it looks like a Frank Lloyd Wright pastiche.
Yes, which was kind of his thing.
And the other thing is, well, it's very pavilion-y.
Yeah.
In that it's a box the design of which is expressively visual.
Yes.
As in, like, everything that's there is there to make a box look very different, striking. You know, it's
The other thing that the you can't tell very well from this photo, but there is a sort of double interior. On the inside, there's a curving wall, which is a bit like a sort of skate ramp on its side, which runs down one wall and which creates this it's a sort of display space, obviously, for putting books on, but it's also got these eye-shaped openings in it. And between all of these things, it's about playing around with display and playing around with
would
lighting.
Would these be like the pointed ellipse?
Yes.
Is that already coming in?
It is, but although these are vertical, these ones, rather than horizontal.
That's the original way. That's the like God way.
Yeah.
This is the shape when you get when you draw two circles of the same size.
Yes.
Where one part of the where the line of the circle meets the center of the other circle, and it's the shape broadly that you get as the intersection.
Yeah.
If you think Venn diagram,
yes,
and you think the bit in the middle,
that's the shape.
That's the shape. That's one of his things.
Yeah, well, you come across that shape in the ticket office as well, which is this again, I guess quite sort of Wrightian. It's this floating metal roof.
Again, extreme. Like, so we're already getting several things here. He's already quite often you have to wait. You know, as someone is doing their architectural career, you see that the pieces falling in, boom, boom, boom. But here we've already got. I think we'll probably elaborate these as we go through the episodes in sort of the different aspects of this. But we've already got a mixture of materials which are all very materially, like, do we call it like haptic or something? I don't know.
Yeah, the wood is very shiny. The concrete has been washed so that it's very stony.
The steel is like black and steely.
Yeah, it's thin.
And there's glass, but the glass is not just. It's not all just clear glass. This guy's been designing glasswork for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's got something to it, and then it's full of very demonstrative geometry. We're already seeing elaborated joints.
Yeah.
So that your eyes are drawn to the intersections of materials by details. Also, an elaborate path.
Yeah.
I mean, this really is just like a path.
Yeah.
It's a kiosk, and it has a complex movement through it, you know, with these kind of curving forms. So we're already seeing so much there. But I guess we're not doing too much close reading on this one. He has these shapes, and because they're like, in one sense, very demonstrative, it's not like it's a shape which looks like something from nature or geometry more than it looks like a classic just bit of building, bit of utility. You know, it feels like it could be a shield on the back of a boat or a leaf or something.
Yeah.
And also because that shape is important in medieval Christian iconography.
Yeah.
There's stuff you immediately start sort of interrogating. But I think here you can really see clearly it's just a piece of architecture.
Yeah. So he also did this sort of leftover courtyard space in the well, it's not a leftover space. It's a space within the Venice pavilion of the Venice Biennale in the Giardini, which is like a sculpture garden. Again, very like Wrightian. This
I mean, what we're seeing on the screen for those of you listening at home is a attractively detailed concrete roof with circular cutouts in it, which are offset with the thick columns coming down in a small brick-walled garden, which has got lots of foliage, such that perhaps a bit more than half of the area is these three very large circular cutouts.
Yeah.
Which extend right to the edge. And then on the ground there is ponds of differing depth, which again create. So we've got like patterns of shade, lit ground, depth of water.
Yeah.
Texture of like different concrete bricks, foliage.
Yeah. Yeah, and then also another, like, these are all done in the early 50s, but he also did the pavilion for Venezuela, I don't know if people don't know the Giardini at Venice, you have like national pavilions, which are permanent installations for work during the various, well, the two biennales. But I don't know how much you can say about this one. Apparently it was refurbished quite unsympathetically in the 60s, so it's difficult to know what its effect was. Something we missed out of the early career is that he did lots of exhibition design all the way through, and was someone who like from I think in the 30s onwards would sort of do the exhibition design for like an exhibition of Paul Klee or whatever, or like
that would make sense, because by the time he's designing his galleries, he's very good at it.
Yeah.
So he was both someone who was very good at it and someone who'd obviously done a lot of it. I mean,
and I think for his time, he was particularly obsessive about the quality of light that works were receiving, and liked to do kind of interesting and unusual things with them.
That's definitely true of the
Yeah.
museums and galleries we'll see later, so that would be very unsurprising.
Yes, and so anyway, I think that's, as you would imagine, that sort of, the Venice Biennale is a big platform, and these projects started going into magazines, and then in the mid-50s he was given a big architectural prize by Adriano Olivetti's foundation, which we'll have, of course, to talk about more in a subsequent episode.
This is typewriter magnate.
Yeah, basically...
Sort of Steve Jobs' office era, like...
Yeah, definitely.
Consumer... Fancy, expensive, super designed consumer electronics. Very successful.
Yeah.
Great company.
Yeah.
Lots of beautiful products.
Yes. And
also total design aesthetic.
Yeah, absolutely.
The factory is going to be beautiful. The shop is going to be beautiful.
The workers' houses.
The
kindergarten.
Everything's going to be beautiful.
Total work of art. Yeah, and then I think after that, basically, he had lots of work all the time and was very successful.
Although, if you're thinking about, he worked for quite a long time. It's not like he's an architect with huge volume of jobs.
No.
I mean, there's more than the famous ones. He does have a domestic practice where he's
doing houses and things. Yeah.
There are some other buildings, but it's not. He's not hugely prodigious.
No.
But when you sort of factor in that each building has got so much design in it,
yeah,
you can see why.
Yes.
This is not someone who's like farming out much to other people.
No, I don't think so. I think he would. Yeah. Also, I'm not. I think like if the job didn't really hold his interest, I think it would sort of not get done as well. There's a story, the cemetery in Modena, which is by Aldo Rossi. He actually was asked to look at, I think before they held the competition. There are some very ambiguous sketches of what he was thinking about in one of the books, which I find impossible to understand in any respect.
Who would find like designing a monumental city's cemetery too boring?
Yeah, I don't know, but
that's like a really...
I'm not sure he found it too boring, but apparently he'd like just faffed around for ages without coming up with for anything, and then they...
Yeah, it's a bit outside his...
Yeah. It's for the best, but I think that...
Well, yeah. I mean, he doesn't do a lot of things which are like serial, as in office buildings, multiple unit housing, industrial, big... Each of his spaces is like a succession of carefully crafted things where one person has quite a defined thing they should sort of be, sequence of things they should be looking at in each place. I mean, that's the classic.
Yeah.
Whereas I suppose that cemetery is like a vast thing, which is like super serial in nature. It's super like lots of little boxes.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of other stuff. There's lots of projects we won't talk about. I think one of his early big museum projects is this one in Palermo, which I've not been to, called Palazzo Abatellis, which looks like it's worth visiting, but I don't really have anything to say about it. I thought that just on this episode we could talk about one early-ish small museum
You've been to this one,
which
right?
I've been to and have
I
lots of
haven't.
photos of, and it's very interesting. And
I
it's
do know
like
what the design is.
it kind of continues from the book pavilions and from the exhibition work, a particular obsession with light as well, which is obviously one of the big Scarpa kind of themes. So,
Yeah, not just, but
so to say something about it, this is in a place called Passagno, which is up in the Veneto, up sort of towards Austria,
up
north,
towards those hills up there,
towards those hills,
yonder.
which become large mountains further
Very
north.
quickly.
And it is an extension to a museum of plaster casts by Antonio Canova, who we should say something about, because I think that although, like, at the time,
He's not mega fashionable now.
no,
On account of doing what come across as rather campy neoclassical sculptures. Lots of bums. Yeah, like campy angels kissing. There's a famous one of campy angels kissing.
I think that most of them are a little bit better than that. But the big.
Oh, I mean, I think of its sort, it's a very high quality.
Oh yeah, no. So,
but it's white marble neoclassical sculpture.
yeah,
Beautiful youths,
Yeah.
angels, all on rather 19th century style classical lines.
yeah. The classical, like the genres that he's working within are, in particular, sort of classical scenes from classical antiquity and mythology.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that people said about him in praise was like, oh, I can't tell the difference between this and a real Greek sculpture.
I can.
Okay. And then the other thing, which was a big part of his practice, was like portrait sculpture and monuments for real people. We should say that at the turn of the 19th century, he was undoubtedly the most famous and successful artist in the world. Like, he was incredibly successful. And if you look at his client list, it's ridiculous. He was working for basically every royal family in Europe and Napoleon. And he did, he has like, here are some statues of Napoleon, here's statues of George Washington, here is a memorial for Nelson. Here he also did, I think, a statue for Wellington. Here is the memorial for the Stuart monarchy. Somehow he manages not to have to take sides at all and to like be the person who is doing all of the like portrait and memorial sculpture for everyone involved in these enormous wars consuming the whole of Europe.
And he had a bit of an industry doing it. It wasn't like he wasn't a single like an artist slaving away in a back room. I think he had like
he would finish them. And his process is interesting, and we're going to see a little bit about them. But he around, I think he was born around like 1760 or something, and he died in the 1820s. And this was built by, essentially, he went home towards the end of his life to the village, town which he'd come from, and he built there. He put all of his money into building this enormous semi-replica of the Pantheon on the edge of this otherwise rather unassuming little town in the north of the Veneto. It's a like kind of Grecian take, so the portico is a little bit different, but it's white. Everything's white, obviously. But, otherwise, that's what it is. And then his brother-in-law
wasn't the inside all grey. I thought Carlo Scarpa painted it all white.
And the inside, I'm not sure if he did. Did he do work to this church? Maybe you might know more about this.
I might be completely wrong. You've been researching it more than me.
And then the other thing, which was what we're going to actually look at, is they built a museum attached to his family home, which has all of his plaster casts. So the way that he would work is that you would make a clay, and then you would make a plaster one, and then the plaster one was then reproduced by the team in marble. Which was achieved by means of like drilling all of these
this
little
looks
holes.
so much like mocap.
So this is, it's kind of amazing. We're looking at a picture of the Three Graces, which is one of his extremely famous sculptures.
So, I mean, you see my point about it, like one of the famous one being two angels kissing.
They're nymphs. They're
Sorry,
not
nymphs.
angels. Yeah.
Yeah, they got big wings in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's very, very good at it.
it's hard to understand why people were quite so into this, but they regarded these guys as like
People had
incredible.
extremely campy taste
Yeah.
in the late 18th
And it's
early
not just
19th
it's
century.
not just him. Like he has a contemporary doing the same thing in Denmark called Thorvaldsen, who has an enormous museum in the middle of Copenhagen. And there's Flaxman in England, I think, has basically nothing. Although his stuff, they did put all of his stuff in the rotunda of University College London when they were building it.
I mean, if you go to the ground floor of the V&A, there's a whole section of this stuff.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, people were very into it, and yeah, Canova had lots of money, which got sunk into this museum, which is it's the kind of, it's got lots of this kind of thing, and they're interesting objects because you have things at all different sorts of scales, but also, apart from not smashing them with a sledgehammer, they don't have any like very dramatic kind of conservation requirements, you know.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about, you can do nice lighting on sculpture because it, unlike paintings, we have to be a bit careful with light, at least for some. Although I think people get too.
Yeah.
I mean, if the thing's been around since the 12th century or whatever, are you really that worried about light touching it?
Yes,
It's pretty
yes.
pervasive substance, like. But you really aren't worried about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Although it's plaster, which is a kind of, I would think you have to worry a little bit about the atmosphere.
Yeah. There is a sort of, I was thinking about this, and there is a kind of connection. So Canova's particular thing, or one of the things that he was particularly famed for, was like the quality of surface finish, and that was the bit that he would do, was the sort of the final polish. And then part of he was in Rome, and part of his kind of performance that he would do for clients is that he would get them to come round in the evening and look at the sculptures by candlelight, which would make the kind of most of the drama of these little reflective surfaces. Anyway, reflection and kind of reflective materials is like one of the many things that Scarpa's got a bit of a bee in his bonnet about. I wanted to say, like, it's full of really strange objects, like naked George Washington. We've also got
Well, that's just how a hero is, isn't it?
yeah. We've also got Napoleon. I don't know if we have he has this famous statue of Napoleon as Mars, god of war.
Yeah. A lot of dressing up.
Yeah. But basically, to describe what the museum is like, there is a bit of it which was built in the early, in the 1830s, which are 3 square barrel-vaulted rooms with a sort of vestibule for keeping the sculpture in. And then what Scarpa does is to refurbish the like vestibule area, and then to build on the side of it these 3 little interconnecting volumes, one of which is like a big cube with strange windows in the corners, one of which is a kind of slightly lower volume with a series of like clerestory windows, bringing light in at the top, and one of which is this kind of like door wedge shaped bit with the end cut off, which looks out onto a little reflecting pool, and that kind of like sits alongside the original building.
It's very clearly a sort of smaller insertion with the what you described as a cube, which is really a square. It's got a square plan, but it's taller than a cube. It's sort of 3, 4, or even a little bit taller. So that there's a little sort of tower next to the larger and kind of grander old bit of the building.
Yeah.
With a kind of thin wedge-shaped addition between the two.
Yeah. So the old bit is basilica sort of form. It's got like a sort of alcove at the far end, and then these sort of procession of spaces.
The late 18th century idea of a perfect Roman building.
Yeah. And it's all full of all sorts of sculpture. I've got way more photos of. He has so many weird ideas that he had. The Napoleon one is good. He also has one which is like called a personification of the Catholic religion.
Yeah.
Which is what looks like it's this sort of woman having a strange vision.
What, like St. Teresa, or
No, she's sort of like, it's like a kind of a personification of the Catholic religion, but like in the visual language of paganism.
I mean, isn't it all?
I don't know.
A bit, anyway.
It's very weird. Maybe I'll try and dig it out. He wanted to build it enormous next to St. Peter's, but they said no.
Oh, spoil sports.
Yeah, money can't buy you everything.
That might have been for the best.
Yeah. And
anyway, should we talk about Carlo Scarpa?
We're going to talk about Carlo Scarpa. Basically, between the two halves, like the old bit has lots of the big impressive casts, and the new bit has more smaller works, in particular, like a lot of the preparatory clay things, and it also is a place for him to show off all of these different ways of handling the relationship between the sculpture and light. And so, like in the vestibule, which he redoes, there are these skylights bringing light down onto the sculptures, kind of. Which
I like we're calling it vestibule, which is a word I associate with Roman villas and like regional train services.
Yeah, what would you call it? It's like
lobby.
A lobby. Okay.
or entrance room. But yeah, you can call it. Yeah.
Yeah. There are certain things which in Italy are like on easy mode, like agriculture is obviously one, but also architectural effects to do with strong direct sunlight. You can have a lot more fun with and enjoy a lot more reliably than you can in other places. So so you get these sort of shafts of light that come down through the ceiling in the vestibule, and you also get like some of the big showpiece stuff is in what I was calling a cube, but which, as you say, is actually a bit taller than a cube, which has the corners cut away in different ways. It has like these little corner windows. The most perverse and therefore enjoyable ones are on the wall, like facing you, which has the bust of Canova on it, where they've been sort of reversed in, so that the windows kind of come into the room, and they create like this, I don't know, they're sort of prismatic feeling.
A basic element of the classic Scarpa exhibition space, because it will help understand all of them, which is that you you have white or coloured walls, which are often slightly rough.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, they're white, and you have objects which are arranged quite freely, often in the room on some sort of stand, which will either be like a black steel frame or like a wooden easel made of little wooden sticks, or sometimes a sort of heavy plinth, and then sometimes there'll be screens coming into the room. But the objects are kind of arranged quite freely. There's not rows of paintings on the wall ever,
yeah.
And there's always quite a lot of space. He's sort of, or in the areas that he does, if he's doing a new area, he will kind of push half the stuff into the old bit so that he can really carefully display a few prestige things. And then the play of light over them can be spaced. So here, the key thing is that the bust of Canova, which is coming out of the wall on a white wall, black steel protrusion bust on it.
Yeah.
And these lanterns, which are like tall, thin rectangles cut in, like negative, but it allows them to have glass bottoms.
Yeah.
Which means that you've always, regardless of where the sun's coming from, got like multiple shafts of light.
Yeah.
But they're not coming in a kind of like, not just from a window mullion. They've both got kind of different spatial qualities.
Yes.
And I would imagine in the room, these things are kind of at once not superimposing because they're kind of high up, but like you definitely look at them.
Oh yeah, no, they're very. I mean, and also the change of height in that space, it sort of creates, feels quite sort of sacred in there between the various effects. You have that sort of resonance, and then obviously Canova's been placed so that he's staring into the room, looking at all of the people coming around.
He's got a couple of his sculptures. I mean, something that would seem to say is that this is a different. There are different takes on how you do exhibitions.
Yes, it's a whole discipline.
This is not very this is a kind of bold interventionist one where the designer, Carlo Scarpa, is making these things look a particular way quite strongly, which is often not. Often you're trying to show the works off to their in you know how the artist wanted them to be, or make some comparison between the works of multiple people and sort of show them evenly. And this is very much, I am making a total work of art by putting 5 sculptures in the room, arranged sequentially, all of which interact with each other, some of which are not given equal hierarchy at all. It's not that you kind of slowly like examine one supposedly and then examine another one. There's a hierarchy, there's a relationship between them, to create the effect of a room.
And between them it's a kind of, it's a very beautiful like assemblage or arrangement within which the individual works, some of them, they do all have their own little meanings, but they matter a bit less than the effect of the whole thing together.
You know how like Ruskin says, I can't recommend that you have a Rembrandt on this wall and like a Poussin on that wall or whatever. Well, that's kind of what he's doing here. It's like, in order to make this architectural composition correct, I need a work of this nature here and a work of that nature there, and then the room will work.
Then on the other corners of the cube have like a slightly different window type, which like keeps the line of it's sort of set in rather than poking out, or rather the other way around. It's poking out of the room rather than poking into the room. So
I feel like he's already doing some slightly louche glass details.
It's like a frameless glass joint at the top, which must be very early in the days of like silicone seals. Not quite sure how they made that one work.
Yeah.
But
they do these things which kind of, he gets away with it, but you get details in there where you're like, ooh, you've cast the glass into the ground. That's kind of like, I associate that with swanky hotel lobbies.
And then at the end of the wedge, there's this other type of window, which is like a full height, looking out onto the pool. And then, there's the reproduction of the Three Graces, which is one of his most famous works. And the effect is such that a lot of the time you have reflected sunlight coming off the pool and going onto the Graces, who are meant to be bathing nymphs. So they have this kind of rippling sunlit. So it's very much like you can see the way in which light all the way through is sort of telling different stories about the objects. And I think like in general, actually, like I would always rather see a very skillful arrangement of objects, which maybe is taking slight liberties with them. But particularly in the case of these, which are not like they're not the real thing. They are preparatory stuff from the workshop, which could very easily have been thrown away, but wasn't. And
also, I think you can get away with it with Canova.
Well, nowadays you can. Yeah, it needs a lot of help to get through to the kids.
I mean, even not. I mean, they're kind of all fun.
Yeah.
I bet this is an experience to go to, though.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's a lovely little. It's a tiny little intervention, and it's very beautifully realised.
So when were the dates on this?
So this was finished in 1957.
Well done. Well, I really think that is the canonic Canova detail.
Yeah.
Botticini.
You can see the way they've joined the legs on as well. They've made them separately. We should say all these little spots are he had one of those machines, what they called, where the two things move exactly parallel to one another. So one what's it called? And then one is a drill and one is a like compass point. Yeah. And essentially you would be putting the point towards these little metal pins which are embedded in the plaster, and then simultaneously that would be drilling into the block of marble, and then you would have all of these as your reference grid for the setting out of the surface of the final thing. And I think they did like reproductions as well. These weren't necessarily one of one, these statues. I mean, it's a great little building. It benefits a lot. None of his buildings are very large. Lots of them, he's hardly building anything new at all. There's an awful lot of refurb, a lot of interiors. It,
But like refurb on a budget that would build a massive building.
yeah, sure. I think he has a real feel for the objects and how to make them fun to experience, which I think is the real challenge in the interpretation of Canova plasterworks.
Yeah.
Like,
No one goes to plaster galleries. There are
No.
plaster cast galleries all over this country.
yeah,
And often you have to go by appointment.
yeah. No, that is. They're not into it.
Well, because you used to not be able to... It used to be very difficult to travel, and there wasn't the internet, or even much by way of photographs.
Yeah.
So it was a great way of studying.
Um.
He's very good at what he does, isn't he?
Yeah.
At the thing he does, which is super specific.
Yeah.
And if you haven't quite understood what that is through us talking about it, we'll continue to talk about it from all different angles.
Yes. Among the buildings, this one has much less of the obsessive detail than the others. It's a lot more about space and light. It does have lots of interesting little things, so I haven't particularly dwelt on them, but the ways the cases are built and this kind of thing are quite peculiar and sort of interesting to look at. But those are themes which I think we can explore much better in some of his other buildings from around this time. We're going to be.
Well,
having a look
I
at.
want to go to this one now, but
It's lovely.
it looks pretty fresh. It doesn't seem to have some of the more compromising things that some of the others get.
Yeah,
But actually, they're all great as well.
yeah. No, it's a lovely part of the world as well.
Yeah, it's almost too lovely. It's so
It's
nice.
Too much. So yes, well, I guess we'll probably leave it there then. But thanks a
Yeah.
lot for.
I'm slightly
joining us on
liking
a-
getting back to architects, like nice architecture.
Architects and architecture. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really into them.
Yes. They're good. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Yeah, thanks very much for joining us. Hello,
Yeah.
YouTube. Nice to be with you.
Hello
And
and goodbye.
to all the loyal listeners on the traditional audio format, I hope that this worked in the usual sort of way. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think we'll try and be as maintain the already fairly low level of helpful descriptions.
Yeah. So all of that will be
not
will be continued.
yeah.
Yeah. But yes, until next time.
Good night.
Thanks. Good
Bye-bye.
night. Bye.